"Excuse me, sir, you missed a spot." Marcus Webb froze, mop in hand. The voice behind him was cold, precise, dripping with the kind of authority that had never once been ignored. He turned slowly. Victoria Sterling, billionaire, CEO. The woman whose face had graced Forbes 3 times this year alone. She walked away without waiting for his response. Just another invisible janitor. But then his phone buzzed. A German number. And Marcus made a choice that would shatter everything. He answered. In perfect German. Right there in the lobby. Victoria stopped mid-stride. What she discovered next would force her to question every assumption she'd ever made about power talent and the people she'd spent years overlooking. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far this story travels. The mop handle was worn smooth from 7 years of use. Marcus Webb knew every groove, every scratch. He knew exactly how much pressure to apply on marble versus tile. He knew which cleaning solution worked best on coffee stains versus wine. He knew that the third-floor bathroom needed extra attention on Mondays because the weekend management meetings always ran long and messy. 7 years. 2,555 days of invisible labor. He pushed the mop across the lobby floor of the Grandview Regency Hotel, Chicago's crown jewel of luxury hospitality. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Italian marble stretched in every direction. Guests in $1,000 suits walked past without a glance. Marcus didn't mind. Invisibility had become comfortable. Safe even. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Marcus glanced at the screen. The country code stopped his heart, +49. Germany. No. Not now. Not here. He looked around. 6:47 a.m. The lobby was nearly empty. A few early checkout guests at the front desk. A bellhop wheeling luggage toward the elevators. No supervisors. The phone kept buzzing. Marcus ducked behind a marble column, pressed the phone to his ear, and whispered, "Ja, hier ist Marcus Webb." The voice on the other end was warm, academic, unmistakably German. Herr Webb. This is Dr. Klaus Müller from the Berlin Institute of International Relations. I apologize for the early hour, but we've just discovered your research paper on diplomatic linguistics. The one you published in 2016? Marcus straightened involuntarily. His German flowed back like muscle memory, fluid and precise. Yes, Dr. Müller. I remember that paper well. It was based on fieldwork I conducted in Brussels. Remarkable work, Herr Webb. Truly remarkable. We're hosting a symposium next spring on cross-cultural negotiation frameworks. Your methodology is exactly what we've been seeking. Would you consider presenting? Marcus closed his eyes. For 2 minutes he wasn't a janitor. He was Professor Marcus Webb again. The man who had lectured at Georgetown. The man who had consulted for the State Department. The man who had existed before everything fell apart. I would be honored to discuss the possibility, Dr. Müller. Perhaps we could schedule a call later this week. Wunderbar. I'll have my assistant send the details. Your German is exceptional, by the way. Better than most native speakers I know. Marcus smiled for the first time in months. Thank you. I spent 3 years in Munich during my doctoral research. It shows. Until we speak again, Herr Webb. Auf Wiederhören, Dr. Müller. Marcus lowered the phone. His hands were trembling. And then he felt it. The silence. The lobby had stopped moving. The bellhop stood frozen by the elevator. The front desk clerk's fingers hovered above her keyboard. 2 guests near the entrance had paused mid-conversation. Everyone was staring at him. But there was only one pair of eyes that mattered. Victoria Sterling stood 5 feet away, a leather briefcase in one hand, a paper coffee cup in the other. She wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Marcus earned in 3 months. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't dismissive. It was confused. Like she had just watched a magic trick she couldn't explain. Marcus's throat went dry. He shoved the phone back into his pocket. "Ma'am," he said quietly, reaching for his mop. "I apologize. I know we're not supposed to take personal calls during "You speak German." It wasn't a question. Marcus hesitated. "Yes, ma'am." "Fluently?" "Yes." Victoria tilted her head slightly. Her eyes moved across his face like she was reading a document she didn't understand. "What else?" Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry." "What other languages do you speak?" He paused. 7 years of invisibility told him to deflect, to minimize, to disappear back into the background where janitors belonged. But something in her voice, something that sounded almost like genuine curiosity, made him answer honestly. "French, Mandarin, Italian, Arabic, some Russian and Japanese, though I'm not as fluent in those." Victoria didn't move. Neither did anyone else in the lobby. "How long have you worked here?" she asked. 7 years, ma'am." "Doing what?" Marcus looked down at his mop. "This." A long silence stretched between them. Then Victoria said something that Marcus would replay in his mind for years. "That's interesting." She turned and walked away, heels clicking against the marble, disappearing into the executive elevator without another word. Marcus stood there, heart pounding, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Derek Hansen found him 40 minutes later. The director of operations moved through the hotel like a man who owned it, even though he was just an employee like everyone else. Expensive shoes, tailored suits, a smile that never reached his eyes. He cornered Marcus in the supply closet. "Cross?" Hansen said, leaning against the doorframe. "Interesting morning." Marcus continued organizing cleaning supplies. "Sir, I heard you put on quite a show in the lobby, speaking in tongues or something." "It was German, sir. A professional call." Hansen laughed. It was not a kind sound. "A professional call. From a janitor." He stepped closer. "Let me explain something to you, Marcus. This hotel operates on structure, hierarchy, everyone in their place. Guests trust us because they know what to expect. They expect bellhops to carry bags. They expect concierges to make reservations. And they expect janitors to mop floors, quietly." Marcus said nothing. "What they don't expect," Hansen continued, "is some maintenance worker performing a one-man show in the middle of the lobby during peak hours. Do you understand how that looks?" "I understand, sir." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing it looks like someone who doesn't appreciate his position. Someone who thinks he's better than the job he's paid to do." Marcus finally turned to face him. "I answered a phone call, Mr. Hansen. That's all." Hansen's smile disappeared. "Effective immediately, you're reassigned. Basement restrooms, midnight shift. Consider it a reminder of where you belong." He walked out without waiting for a response. Marcus stood alone in the supply closet, staring at the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. 7 years. Same job, same invisibility, same silence. Nothing ever changed. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table in his small apartment on the south side. The place was modest, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a temperamental shower, a kitchen that smelled permanently of whatever the neighbors were cooking. But it was clean. It was safe. It was home. On the wall behind him hung a frame that seemed to belong in a different universe. Inside, a diploma from Yale, a certificate from the Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and 3 awards from international linguistics conferences. Relics of another life. The bedroom door creaked open. Lily Webb padded into the kitchen barefoot, wearing pajamas covered with cartoon planets. She was 10 years old, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. She carried a sketchbook under one arm and a box of crayons under the other. She hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since the accident. The doctors called it selective mutism, trauma-induced. Her mother had died in the car beside her while Lily sat trapped in the back seat for 47 minutes waiting for rescue. She could speak. She simply chose not to. Marcus had learned to listen differently since then, to watch her drawings, to read her notes, to understand the language she had created in silence. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "Couldn't sleep." Lily shook her head. She sat across from him and opened her sketchbook. Marcus watched her draw. First a building tall grand with columns and chandeliers, the hotel, then a figure with a mop, him, then another figure smaller in a gray suit, watching. Lily pointed to the figure in the suit, then looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows. "That's my boss," Marcus said. "Well, one of them. The big boss." Lily wrote in the margin. "Was she mean?" Marcus considered the question. "No, she was curious." Lily tilted her head exactly the way Victoria had done hours earlier. She wrote, "About what about me, I think. About what I know." Lily's pencil moved again. "Do you know a lot?" Marcus smiled. "I used to think so. Now I'm not sure." Lily stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to a fresh page and began drawing something new. Flags. First the German flag, black, red, gold. Then the French flag. Then the Italian. Then the Chinese. Under each flag, she wrote a word in her careful, blocky handwriting. Words Marcus had taught her over the years during bedtime stories and lazy Sunday mornings. Guten Tag. Bonjour. Ciao. Ni hao. She held up the page for him to see. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "You remembered," he whispered. Lily nodded. Then she pointed to the German flag and said out loud in her soft, rusty voice that Marcus hadn't heard in so long. "Willkommen." Welcome. Marcus couldn't breathe. "Lily." She looked down at her drawing, suddenly shy. Then she wrote quickly. "I've been practicing." In my head. Tears burned in Marcus's eyes. He reached across the table and took her hand. "That's the most beautiful word I've ever heard," he said. Lily squeezed his fingers. Then she wrote, "Maybe one day I'll say more." "Whenever you're ready, sweetheart. No rush." She nodded, gathered her supplies, and padded back to her bedroom. Marcus sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the flags she had drawn. For 7 years, he had accepted invisibility. He had told himself that silence was safety, that staying small kept him and Lily protected from a world that had already taken so much. But tonight, watching his daughter speak her first word in 2 years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, invisibility wasn't protection at all. Maybe it was just another kind of prison. His phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number, local area code. Marcus answered cautiously. "Hello, Mr. Webb." A woman's voice, professional, efficient. "This is the executive assistant to Ms. Sterling. You're requested to report to the 42nd floor tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. sharp. Conference room B." Marcus sat up straight. "I'm sorry, the 42nd floor?" "That's correct." "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. Maintenance staff don't have access to the executive level." "Access will be arranged. 7 a.m. Mr. Webb. Don't be late." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone for a long time. Then he looked at the diploma on the wall, at Lily's drawing of flags, at the mop leaning against the kitchen counter waiting for another day of invisible labor. Something was changing. He didn't know if it was good or bad. He didn't know if it would save him or destroy him. But for the first time in 7 years, Marcus Webb felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. The elevator to the 42nd floor required a special keycard. Marcus didn't have one. But when he arrived at 6:52 a.m., dressed in his cleanest uniform, shoes polished for the first time in months, the security guard at the executive entrance simply nodded and waved him through. "Ms. Sterling is expecting you, Mr. Webb." The words felt surreal. The executive floor was everything the basement wasn't. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, air that smelled like money and ambition. People moved with purpose, carrying tablets and coffee cups, speaking in hushed tones about numbers Marcus couldn't comprehend. He felt like an imposter. A janitor playing dress-up in a world that had never wanted him. A young woman in a tailored blazer approached. "Mr. Webb, I'm Cassandra, Ms. Sterling's assistant. Please follow me." She led him down a corridor lined with modern art paintings that probably cost more than his annual salary to a door marked Conference Room B. "Ms. Sterling will be with you shortly," Cassandra said. "Can I get you anything, coffee, water?" "Water would be fine, thank you." She disappeared, and Marcus was left alone in a conference room that could seat 30 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Chicago skyline, the morning sun painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. He sat in one of the leather chairs and tried to remember how to breathe. 5 minutes passed. 10. The door opened. Victoria Sterling entered without fanfare. No entourage, no assistants, just her, a tablet in one hand, a folder in the other. She sat across from him. "You look nervous," she said. "I am nervous, ma'am." "Why?" Marcus considered lying, deflecting, playing the humble janitor role that had kept him safe for 7 years. Instead, he told the truth. "Because I don't know why I'm here. Because yesterday I was cleaning bathrooms, and today I'm sitting in a conference room that costs more than my apartment. Because nothing in my life makes sense right now, and I don't know if that's good or terrifying." Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. "Honest," she said. "I appreciate that." She opened the folder and slid it across the table. Marcus looked down. It was his personnel file. 7 years of performance reviews, attendance records, and internal applications. 12 internal applications to be precise. All denied. "You applied for a position in guest services in 2018, Victoria said. Denied. Front desk coordinator in 2019, denied. Translation services in 2020, 2021, and 2022, denied, denied, denied. Event planning assistant, cultural liaison, international relations consultant." She looked up at him. "All denied. Do you know why?" Marcus shook his head. Victoria pulled out another document. The reasons varied. Overqualified. Not the right cultural fit. Accent might be distracting to guests. My personal favorite, background does not align with position requirements. She set the paper down. You have a master's degree from Yale. You were a research fellow at the University of Bologna. You lectured at Georgetown and consulted for the State Department. You speak 7 languages fluently and 3 more conversationally. You've published academic papers that are still cited in international relations curricula around the world. Her voice hardened. And someone in my organization looked at all of that and decided you should spend 7 years cleaning toilets. Marcus didn't know what to say. I pulled the approval records for your applications, Victoria continued. Every single one was rejected by the same person. Do you know who? No, ma'am. Derek Hansen. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Mr. Hansen has been director of operations for 12 years, Victoria said. He's built a system that rewards people who look like him, sound like him, come from the same background as him. He calls it maintaining standards. I call it something else. She leaned forward. I'm offering you a job, Mr. Webb, a real one. Marcus blinked. I'm sorry. The International Trade Summit begins in 72 hours. We're hosting delegations from 6 countries, high-level negotiations, diplomatic sensitivities. And 2 of my lead translators just quit because they received better offers from a competitor. She pushed a document toward him. I need someone who understands language, not just vocabulary and grammar, but tone, context, culture, the things that get lost when people try to communicate across borders. Marcus looked at the document. It was a contract, temporary position, cultural liaison, compensation $6,000 per week. His hands trembled. Ma'am, I haven't worked in this field in 7 years. I've been mopping floors. Yes, I'm aware. Victoria's voice softened slightly. But when I watched you speak German in that lobby, I didn't see a janitor. I saw someone who loved language, someone who had forgotten how much he had to offer. She stood up. This isn't charity, Mr. Webb. I don't believe in charity. This is a correction. You've been wasted in this organization for 7 years. I'm simply refusing to waste you any longer. Marcus stared at the contract. Why? He asked quietly. Why do you care? Victoria paused at the door. Because I've spent 20 years building an empire, Mr. Webb. And yesterday, for the first time, I realized I might have built it on top of people I never bothered to see. She opened the door. You have until noon to decide, but I hope you'll say yes. She left. Marcus sat alone in the conference room, contract in hand, the Chicago skyline glittering beyond the windows. Somewhere on the 40th floor below, Derek Hansen was probably reviewing reports, confident in his position, secure in his power. He had no idea what was coming, and neither Marcus realized, did he? Marcus arrived home that afternoon to find Lily at the kitchen table surrounded by books. Not her usual books, picture books and graphic novels. These were different. Language books. German, French, Italian. She looked up when he entered, eyes bright with something he hadn't seen in 2 years. Curiosity. She held up one of the German books and pointed to a phrase, Wie geht es Ihnen? How are you? Marcus translated automatically. The formal version. Lily wrote in her notebook, Teach me more. Marcus sat across from her, his heart full and breaking at the same time. I got a new job today, he said. At least I think I did, a temporary one. Lily raised her eyebrows. It's complicated. Someone important noticed me, asked me to help with something I used to be good at a long time ago. Lily wrote, Are you scared, terrified? She wrote, Good. Mom always said that meant it mattered. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Yeah, he whispered. She did say that, didn't she? Lily nodded. Then she pushed the German book toward him and pointed to another phrase. Ich bin bereit. I am ready. Marcus looked at his daughter, this brave, silent, extraordinary girl who had survived horrors no child should face and was somehow still reaching toward the light. You know what? He said. I think I am too. The next morning, Marcus walked into the executive wing with a new badge around his neck. It read, Webb M, Cultural Liaison. He touched it once lightly, like he wasn't sure it was real. A young analyst named Zoe intercepted him in the hallway. Mr. Webb, I'm your support coordinator. Ms. Sterling asked me to bring you up to speed on the summit materials. She led him to a small office that had been hastily prepared, desk, computer stacks of documents in multiple languages. These are the translation packages, Zoe explained. Welcome speeches, negotiation frameworks, cultural briefings, seating arrangements. Everything needs to be reviewed before the delegates arrive. Marcus sat down and began to read. Within 20 minutes, he found the first error. Within an hour, he had found 17. The Mandarin welcome letter contained a phrase that literally translated to, We graciously acknowledge your surrender. The Italian business etiquette guide used informal language that would be considered insulting to senior executives. The Arabic cultural briefing referenced traditions that had been outdated for 30 years. Marcus flagged each error, corrected it, and kept reading. By noon, he had rebuilt entire sections of the translation packages. Zoe watched him work with wide eyes. How do you know all this? She asked. Marcus didn't look up. I spent 15 years studying it. Then I spent 7 years trying to forget. Why would you try to forget something like this? He paused, considering the question. Because remembering hurt too much. Zoe was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm glad you remembered. Marcus looked up at her and smiled sadly. Yeah, he said. Me too. What? That evening, Derek Hansen appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock, didn't ask permission, just walked in like he owned the space, which in his mind he probably did. Well, well, he said, leaning against the doorframe. The janitor goes corporate. Marcus kept working. Mr. Hansen? I hear you've been busy, rewriting translation packages, making suggestions, playing consultant. Correcting errors. Yes. Hansen walked closer, his expensive shoes silent on the carpet. You know what I find interesting, Marcus? You applied to work in translation services 3 times. 3 times you were told you weren't qualified, and now suddenly you're the expert. Marcus finally looked up. I was always qualified, Mr. Hansen. The question was whether anyone would notice. Hansen's smile thinned. Let me give you some advice, he said quietly. This little experiment of Victoria's, it won't last. She gets these ideas, sometimes pet projects, diversity initiatives, feel-good nonsense. They burn bright for a week, maybe 2. Then reality sets in and things go back to normal. He leaned closer. And when they do, you'll be right back where you started. Basement restrooms. Midnight shift. Where you belong. Marcus held his gaze without flinching. Maybe, he said. But maybe not. Hansen straightened. We'll see. He walked out without another word. Marcus sat alone in the silence, Derek Hansen's threat hanging in the air like smoke. But something had changed. Something fundamental. For 7 years, Marcus had accepted the rules, played it safe, stayed invisible. Not anymore. Whatever came next, whatever Hansen threw at him, whatever obstacles appeared, Marcus was done hiding. He picked up his pen and returned to work. The summit was in 48 hours, and he had a feeling that everything was about to change. 48 hours before the summit, Marcus found the first real bomb buried in the translation packages. He had been working since 5 a.m., coffee growing cold beside his keyboard, when he opened the file labeled Strategic Partnership Framework Mandarin Version. His blood ran cold. The phrase that should have read, "We propose mutual cooperation for shared prosperity," had been translated as, "We demand your compliance for our benefit." Marcus read it again, then again. This wasn't a typo. This wasn't a careless mistake from an overworked translator. This was sabotage. He pulled up the revision history. The original translation had been correct, clean, professional, diplomatically appropriate. But someone had accessed the file 3 days ago and changed it. The edit was logged under a generic system account, Apex Global Linguistics. Marcus opened another file. The Korean welcome speech, same pattern. The phrase, "We honor your nation's achievements," had become, "We acknowledge your nation's attempts." Attempts. Not achievements. Attempts. A single word that would insult an entire delegation before they even sat down. He kept digging. The Arabic cultural briefing. The Italian negotiation framework. The French diplomatic protocols. Every document had been corrupted. Subtle changes. Poison hidden in plain sight. Marcus grabbed his phone and dialed Zoe. "I need you in my office, now." She arrived 7 minutes later, breathless. "What's wrong?" Marcus pointed at the screen. "Look at this." Zoe leaned in reading. Her face went pale. "Oh my God." "It's not just this file," Marcus said. "It's everything. Someone systematically sabotaged the entire translation package." "Who would do that?" Marcus pulled up the vendor contract. Apex Global Linguistics. They were hired 6 weeks ago to handle all summit translations. The contract was approved by... He stopped. Zoe finished for him. "Derek Hansen." Marcus nodded slowly. "There's more." He clicked to another screen. Apex's lead translator. No academic record. No certifications. No prior experience with diplomatic work. Then how did they get the contract? Marcus pulled up a staff directory and pointed at a name. Ashley Hansen, project coordinator at Apex Global Linguistics. Zoe's eyes widened. That's Derek Hansen's niece. The room fell silent. Zoe sank into a chair. He hired his own niece's company, gave them a $40,000 contract, and they delivered machine translations that could start an international incident. Not could, Marcus corrected. Would. If these documents had reached the delegates, we would have insulted China, Korea, Italy, France, and half the Arab world before the first handshake. We have to tell Ms. Sterling. Marcus was already standing. I know. Victoria's office was on the 43rd floor, one level above the executive suite. Marcus had never been there. Maintenance staff didn't get invited to the top. Cassandra, the assistant, tried to stop him. Mr. Webb, Ms. Sterling is in a meeting. It's urgent. She specifically asked not to be disturbed. Tell her it's about the summit translations. Tell her we have a problem. Cassandra hesitated, then picked up her phone. 30 seconds later, she nodded. Go in. Victoria's office was smaller than Marcus expected. Clean lines, minimal decoration. A desk covered with documents. A window overlooking the city. Victoria stood by that window, phone pressed to her ear. She held up one finger. Wait. Marcus waited. I understand the concerns, Victoria said into the phone. But the timeline is not negotiable. We deliver on schedule, or we don't deliver at all. She paused. Then find someone who can. That's what I pay you for. She hung up and turned to Marcus. This better be important. Marcus handed her the folder he had prepared. Every translation document for the summit has been corrupted, deliberately. The changes would have insulted multiple delegations and potentially destroyed the negotiations before they started. Victoria opened the folder. Her expression didn't change as she read, but her jaw tightened. Who? The vendor. Apex Global Linguistics. They were contracted 6 weeks ago. By whom? Derek Hansen. Victoria looked up sharply. The lead translator at Apex, Marcus continued, is Ashley Hansen, Derek's niece. She has no qualifications. The translations appear to be machine-generated with minimal human review. Victoria set the folder down very slowly. You're telling me my director of operations hired his unqualified niece to handle $40,000 worth of diplomatic translations, and she delivered work that could have caused an international incident? Yes, ma'am. Victoria walked to her desk and pressed an intercom button. Cassandra, get me the full contract file for Apex Global Linguistics, and tell Derek Hansen I want him in my office in 30 minutes. She released the button and looked at Marcus. Can you fix this? I've already started, but I need help. Real translators, people I can trust. How many? At least 3, preferably native speakers in Mandarin, Korean, and Arabic. Victoria picked up her phone. I'll have them here by noon. She paused. Can we make the deadline? Marcus thought about the mountain of corrupted documents, the complexity of diplomatic language, the precision required. It'll be close. That's not what I asked. He met her eyes. Yes, we can make it. Victoria nodded. Then make it happen. Marcus turned to leave. Mr. Webb. He stopped. Thank you for catching this. If those documents had reached the delegates, they didn't. Because of you. Marcus didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being thanked. Wasn't used to being seen at all. I'm just doing my job, ma'am. Victoria almost smiled. No, you're doing the job you should have had 7 years ago. The next 18 hours blurred together. Marcus worked alongside 3 translators Victoria had pulled from a university language department. Dr. Chen, a Mandarin specialist. Professor Kim, who had taught Korean diplomatic language for 20 years. And Fatima, a young doctoral student, whose Arabic was so precise it made Marcus's look elementary. They rebuilt everything. Every document. Every phrase. Every word. Marcus didn't sleep. Didn't eat except when Zoe forced a sandwich into his hands. Didn't stop. At 3 a.m., Fatima looked up from her screen. "Mr. Webb, you need to rest." "I'll rest when it's done. You've been working for 20 hours straight. So have you." She smiled tiredly. "I'm 26. You're—" "Don't finish that sentence." Fatima laughed. It was the first laughter Marcus had heard in days. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "This isn't even your real job. You could have just reported the problem and walked away." Marcus stopped typing. The question hung in the air. "My wife was a sign language interpreter," he said finally. "She spent her life helping people communicate across barriers. She believed that language was the most powerful tool humans had invented, not for talking, but for understanding." He looked at the screen full of words. "She died 2 years ago. And I think I stopped believing in anything after that. I took a job where I didn't have to think, didn't have to feel, didn't have to remember what I used to be." He turned to Fatima. "But these documents, they're not just words. They're bridges. Between countries. Between cultures. Between people who might never understand each other without help." He shrugged. "I guess I'm not ready to stop building bridges yet." Fatima was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your wife sounds like she was remarkable." "She was." "What was her name?" Marcus smiled. "Grace. Her name was Grace." At 6 a.m. they finished. Every document reviewed. Every error corrected. Every phrase polished until it sang. Marcus printed the final versions and walked them personally to the summit preparation room. The space was already buzzing with activity. Staff arranging chairs. Technicians testing audio equipment. Caterers setting up the morning coffee service. Marcus placed the documents on the podium and stepped back. It was done. Behind him a voice said, "You look like hell." He turned. Victoria stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "I feel like hell," Marcus admitted. She handed him one of the cups. "Drink this. You have 4 hours until the first delegates arrive." "I know. Go home, see your daughter, take a shower, come back ready." Marcus hesitated. "What about Hansen?" Victoria's expression hardened. "That's being handled." "Handled how?" "He's been suspended pending investigation. The contract with Apex has been terminated. His access to all summit materials has been revoked." Marcus nodded slowly. "He won't go quietly." "No," Victoria agreed. "He won't, but that's my problem, not yours." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Webb, when this is over, I'd like to discuss something with you, something more permanent." Marcus blinked. "More permanent? Let's survive the summit first, then we'll talk." She walked away, heels clicking against the floor. Marcus stood alone in the empty room, coffee warming his hands, wondering if this was real. 3 days ago, he had been invisible. Now he was standing at the center of an international summit, holding documents that could shape relationships between nations. Life, he thought, had a strange sense of humor. Marcus made it home by 7:30 a.m. Lily was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her sketchbook. When she saw him, her eyes widened. She held up her notebook. "You look tired." "I am tired, sweetheart. Did you save the world?" Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the first one in, longer than he could remember. "Not quite, but I stopped some people from accidentally starting a fight." Lily nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. She wrote, "I made you something." She pushed her sketchbook across the table. Marcus looked down. It was a drawing. A man standing at a podium, flags behind him from a dozen countries. The man was smiling. Around him, people were applauding. At the bottom, in Lily's careful handwriting, "Dad at work." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Lily," she wrote quickly, "you're not invisible anymore, Daddy. I can see you." Marcus pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. I can see you too, sweetheart. I always could. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then, Lily pulled back and wrote, "You need a shower. You smell like coffee and stress." Marcus burst out laughing. Fair enough. He showered, changed into his cleanest suit, looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back didn't look like a janitor anymore. He wasn't sure who he looked like, but he thought maybe he was starting to recognize himself again. His phone buzzed. A text from Zoe. "First delegation arrives in 90 minutes. Ms. Sterling wants you in position." Marcus took a deep breath. He walked back to Lily's room. She was drawing again, absorbed in her work. "I have to go back, sweetheart. Mrs. Patterson from next door will check on you." Lily nodded without looking up. Then she held up a new page. 3 words. "Make them listen." Marcus smiled. "I will." The lobby of the Grandview Regency had been transformed. Flags from 12 nations lined the atrium. Security personnel moved with quiet precision. Staff in crisp uniforms stood at attention. Marcus walked through the center of it all, lanyard around his neck, tablet in hand. He didn't feel invisible anymore. The first delegation to arrive was from the Netherlands. Marcus recognized the lead negotiator from the briefing documents, a tall woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Minister Vanderberg. She had a reputation for being difficult to impress. He approached her smoothly and said in perfect Dutch, "Welcome in Chicago, Minister Vanderberg. Ik hoop dat uw reis aangenaam was." Welcome to Chicago. I hope your journey was pleasant. The minister stopped mid-stride. Her eyebrows rose. "You speak Dutch?" "I do, Minister. I spent 2 years in Amsterdam studying comparative linguistics." She studied him for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "Finally," she said, "someone who understands that Google Translate is not a diplomatic tool." Marcus smiled back. "I couldn't agree more." He escorted her delegation to their designated lounge, answering questions in Dutch the entire way. By the time they reached the room, Minister Vanderberg was laughing at a joke he had made about Amsterdam weather. 1 delegation down. 5 to go. The Chinese delegation arrived next. Then the Koreans. Then the Italians, the French, and finally the representatives from Saudi Arabia. Marcus greeted each one in their native language. He navigated cultural protocols with precision. He smoothed over the small misunderstandings that inevitably arose when powerful people from different worlds tried to communicate. By noon, the summit was officially underway, and Marcus was at the center of it all. He didn't notice Victoria watching him from the mezzanine above. Didn't see her assistant Cassandra lean over and whisper, "He's impressive." Didn't hear Victoria reply, "He's been impressive for 7 years. We just weren't paying attention." The first crisis came at 2:47 p.m. The Korean delegation's lead negotiator, a stern man named Director Park, stormed out of a preliminary meeting and demanded to see whoever was responsible for the insulting seating arrangement. Marcus intercepted him in the hallway. "Director Park," he said in Korean, "I understand there's a problem." Park's eyes narrowed. "You speak Korean?" "I do. Please tell me what's wrong." "The seating chart places me below the junior minister from Japan. This is unacceptable. It suggests Korea is subordinate. It is a deliberate insult." Marcus nodded calmly. "I understand completely. This was not intentional, and I apologize for the error. If you'll allow me, I can have the arrangement corrected within the hour." Park studied him. "You understand why this matters?" Director Park: "I wrote my thesis on the historical tensions between Korea and Japan and how they manifest in diplomatic protocols. I understand exactly why this matters." A long pause. Then Park said, "You are not what I expected from an American hotel." "Neither was I," Marcus replied. "But sometimes people surprise us." Park almost smiled. "Fix the seating. We will continue." He walked back into the meeting room. Crisis averted. Marcus allowed himself exactly 3 seconds to breathe. Then his earpiece crackled with Victoria's voice. Mr. Webb, my office, now. He found her standing by the window phone in hand. Close the door. He did. Derek Hansen just filed a formal complaint against you, Victoria said. He's claiming you sabotaged the Apex translations yourself to make him look bad and position yourself for a promotion. Marcus felt his stomach drop. That's not true. I know it's not true. I have the revision logs. I have the timestamps. I have testimony from 3 independent translators who spent 18 hours fixing his niece's incompetent work. She set her phone down. But Hansen has friends on the board. He's been here 12 years. He knows where bodies are buried. And he's going to fight. Marcus took a breath. What do you want me to do? Victoria turned to face him. I want you to keep doing your job. Let me handle Hansen. But I need you to understand something. This isn't going to be clean. When this goes public, people are going to choose sides. Some of them are going to choose him. I'm not afraid of that. You should be. He's going to come after you. After your record. After anything he can use. Marcus thought about Lily. About Grace. About 7 years of silence and invisibility. Let him come, he said quietly. I've survived worse. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. I believe you have. The summit continued through the afternoon and into the evening. Marcus translated, mediated, smoothed over cultural landmines that would have exploded without his intervention. By 9 p.m., the first day was officially declared a success. Delegates shook hands. Agreements were outlined. The groundwork for major international deals had been laid. Marcus stood in a corner of the main ballroom watching diplomats mingle over champagne. A voice beside him said, You know I've been to dozens of these things. Never seen one go this smoothly on day one. He turned. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit, silver hair, warm eyes. I'm sorry, I don't think we've met. The man extended his hand. Senator William Chen, California. I'm here representing the Commerce Committee. Marcus shook his hand. Marcus Webb, Cultural Liaison. I know who you are, Mr. Webb. Minister Vanderberg spent 10 minutes telling me about the man who greeted her in perfect Dutch. He smiled. She was very impressed. She's not easily impressed. I was just doing my job, Senator. Were you? Because from what I understand, 3 days ago your job was something quite different. Marcus didn't respond. Senator Chen leaned closer. Let me give you some advice, Mr. Webb. In my experience, the people who say, I was just doing my job, are usually the ones who were doing much more than that. He patted Marcus on the shoulder. Don't sell yourself short. The world needs more people who care about getting things right. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus stood alone, the senator's words echoing in his mind. He thought about Grace, about what she would say if she could see him now. He thought about Lily at home with her sketchbook waiting for him. He thought about all the years he had spent invisible, convinced that staying small was the same as staying safe. It wasn't. He understood that now. At 11 p.m., Marcus finally left the hotel. The city was quiet, cold. December wind cutting through his suit jacket. He walked to the train station, exhaustion settling into his bones. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria, Day 1 complete. Well done. He typed back, Thank you for the opportunity. Her reply came immediately. This isn't charity, Mr. Webb. You earned this. He stared at the words. 7 years of invisibility. And now, finally someone was seeing him. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know how Hansen's counterattack would unfold. Didn't know if this new life would last or crumble beneath him. But for the first time in 2 years, Marcus Webb felt something other than grief. He felt alive. When he got home, Lily was asleep on the couch, sketchbook open on her chest. He lifted her gently, carried her to bed, tucked the blankets around her. She stirred slightly. Daddy. I'm here, sweetheart. Did you make them listen? He kissed her forehead. Yeah, I think I did. She smiled without opening her eyes. Good. Within seconds, she was asleep again. Marcus stood in her doorway watching her breathe. Tomorrow the summit would continue. Tomorrow Hansen would launch his attack. Tomorrow everything could change. But tonight, right now, in this small apartment on the south side of Chicago, Marcus Webb was exactly where he needed to be. He was home. And he was no longer invisible. The second morning of the summit began with applause. Marcus walked into the main conference room to find Minister Vanderburg standing at the podium, addressing the assembled delegates. I want to acknowledge, she said, the exceptional work of the cultural liaison team at this summit. For the first time in my 20 years of international diplomacy, I have felt genuinely understood, not just translated. She looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Webb, wherever you are, please stand. Marcus froze. Every head in the room turned toward him. He stood slowly, heart pounding. The applause grew louder. Director Park from Korea nodded approvingly. The Italian delegation's lead negotiator raised his coffee cup in salute. Even the typically reserved Saudi representatives joined in. Marcus didn't know what to do with his hands, didn't know where to look. Victoria caught his eye from across the room. She wasn't smiling exactly, but there was something in her expression that looked almost like pride. The moment passed. The applause faded. Business resumed. But something had shifted. Marcus wasn't invisible anymore, and everyone in that room knew it. The attack came 2 hours later. Marcus was reviewing afternoon session notes when his tablet buzzed with an urgent notification. An email had been sent to the entire executive team, CC'd to the board of directors. Subject concerns. Regarding unauthorized personnel access summit security breach. He opened it. The sender was Derek Hansen. To the board and executive leadership. It has come to my attention that a member of the maintenance staff has been granted unprecedented access to sensitive summit materials without proper vetting or authorization. Marcus Webb, currently employed as a janitor, was elevated to a liaison position without following established HR protocols, background verification procedures, or security clearance requirements. Furthermore, I have reason to believe Mr. Webb may have deliberately sabotaged translation materials provided by our contracted vendor Apex Global Linguistics in order to position himself as indispensable and secure a promotion through manufactured crisis. I am requesting an immediate investigation and the suspension of Mr. Webb pending review. This organization has protocols for a reason. We cannot allow personal favoritism to compromise our standards or our security. Derek Hansen, Director of Operations. Marcus read it twice. Then he read it a third time. His hands were steady, but his chest felt tight. He had known this was coming. Victoria had warned him. But seeing it in writing, seeing his name attached to words like sabotage and security breach, made it real in a way he hadn't anticipated. His phone rang. Victoria. My office. Now. When he arrived, Victoria was pacing. 2 members of the legal team sat at the conference table, laptops open. Sit down, Victoria said. We need to talk about this. Marcus sat. Hansen's email has already reached 3 board members. Victoria continued. 2 of them are demanding answers. 1 is calling for your immediate removal from the summit. I didn't sabotage anything. I know that. We have the evidence. But Hansen is playing a different game. He's not trying to prove you're guilty. He's trying to create enough doubt that the board forces my hand. One of the lawyers spoke up. Ms. Sterling, if I may, the situation is complicated. Mr. Webb was promoted outside normal channels. There's no documentation of a formal interview process, no HR approval on file, no security clearance verification. Because there wasn't time, Victoria snapped. We had 72 hours and 2 translators who had just quit. I made a judgment call. A judgment call that Hansen is now using against you. Victoria stopped pacing. The room fell silent. Marcus spoke quietly. If my presence is causing problems for the summit, I can step back. The translations are complete. The delegates are satisfied. You don't need me in the room anymore. Victoria turned to face him. No. Ma'am. I said no. Her voice was sharp. I don't retreat from fights I didn't start, and I don't abandon people who did nothing wrong. She looked at the lawyers. What do we have on Hansen? The younger lawyer pulled up a file. The Apex contract. $42,000 paid to a company owned by his niece. No competitive bidding process. No verification of credentials. The lead translator has a bachelor's degree in marketing and no language certifications whatsoever. Can we prove he knew the translations were inadequate? We have emails. He approved the final package without review. When our quality assurance team flagged concerns 2 weeks ago, he dismissed them as unnecessary interference. Victoria nodded slowly. Then we don't just defend, we attack. Marcus shifted in his chair. Ms. Sterling, with respect, this isn't about me versus Hansen. The summit is what matters. The delegates, the negotiations, the deals being made. If this becomes a public fight, it could overshadow everything. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. You're right, she said finally. The summit comes first. But when it's over, Hansen answers for what he did. All of it. She turned to the lawyers. Prepare a response to the board, facts only, timeline of events, evidence of translation errors, documentation of the correction process. No accusations, no drama. Let the facts speak. They nodded and began typing. Victoria walked to Marcus and lowered her voice. Can you finish this 2 more days? Can you hold it together? Marcus thought about Lily, about Grace, about all the years he had spent swallowing his pride and accepting less than he deserved. I've held it together through worse. I know you have. She paused. That's why I trust you. The afternoon session was tense. Word had spread not the details, but the general sense that something was happening behind the scenes. Staff whispered in corners. Delegates exchanged curious glances. Marcus ignored it all. He translated a 3-hour negotiation between the Chinese and Italian delegations, navigating cultural landmines with precision. He mediated a dispute over intellectual property language that had nearly derailed the entire framework. He smoothed over a misunderstanding about meeting schedules that could have offended the Korean team. By 6 p.m., he was exhausted. But the work was done. He was walking toward the elevator when Derek Hansen appeared in front of him. Webb. Marcus stopped. Mr. Hansen. Hansen smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed he had already won. Quite a day. I hear there's been some concern about your position here. I've heard the same. You know I've been in this business for 12 years. I've seen a lot of people try to climb ladders they weren't meant to climb. It never ends well. Marcus kept his voice even. Is there something you need, Mr. Hansen? Hansen stepped closer. Let me tell you how this ends. The board will review my complaint. They'll find that proper protocols weren't followed. Victoria will be forced to admit she made a mistake, and you'll go back to where you belong. Which is the basement, the night shift, the places where people like you are supposed to stay. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not anger exactly, something older, deeper. People like me, he repeated. You know what I mean? I'm not sure I do. Why don't you explain it? Hansen's smile faltered slightly. You're a janitor, Webb, a mop pusher. I don't care how many languages you speak or what degrees you have. You don't belong in these rooms. You never did. Marcus took a step closer. His voice dropped. My wife died 2 years ago. She was killed by a drunk driver, while our daughter sat in the back seat and watched. I spent the next 6 months barely able to function. I took the first job I could find, not because I couldn't do anything else, but because I couldn't feel anything else. Hansen's expression flickered. I pushed a mop for 7 years, because it was easier than remembering who I used to be. I applied for 12 positions in this hotel and was rejected every single time by you. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because you looked at my name, my face, my background, and decided I didn't fit. Marcus's voice hardened. You want to know what kind of person I am, Mr. Hansen? I'm the kind who spent 18 hours fixing your mistakes so this summit wouldn't collapse. I'm the kind who greeted 6 delegations in their native languages so they would feel respected. I'm the kind who built bridges you didn't even know were broken. He stepped back. So go ahead. File your complaints. Tell the board whatever story makes you feel powerful. But when this is over, when the deals are signed, and the delegates go home, they're going to remember who made it work. And it won't be you. He walked past Hansen without another word. Behind him, Hansen stood frozen, his smile completely gone. That night, Marcus found Lily waiting up for him. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a piece of paper in front of her. When he walked in, she held it up. It was a drawing of 2 figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. Under the drawing, she had written, "You and me against the world." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Where did you hear that phrase, sweetheart?" Lily pointed to a photo on the wall. Grace's photo. She wrote Mom used to say it. Marcus sat down heavily. "Yeah, she did." Lily studied his face. Then she wrote, "Bad day, complicated day." "Are they being mean to you?" Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to burden her with adult problems, but Lily had always been perceptive. Even before she stopped talking, she had understood things that other children missed. "Someone is trying to make trouble for me, trying to make me look bad." Why? Because he's scared. Because I'm doing something he didn't think I could do. Because sometimes people try to tear others down instead of building themselves up. Lily thought about this. Then she wrote, "What are you going to do? Keep working. Keep doing my job. Let the truth speak for itself." Lily nodded slowly. Then she added, "Mom would be proud of you." Marcus couldn't speak for a moment. "Thank you, sweetheart." She stood up, walked around the table and hugged him. Her arms were small, but her grip was fierce. They stayed like that for a long time. The third day of the summit began with an emergency. Marcus arrived at 6 a.m. to find Victoria in the main conference room, phone pressed to her ear, expression thunderous. "What do you mean the files are corrupted?" she said. "The closing ceremony presentation was finalized yesterday." Marcus's blood went cold. Victoria listened for another moment, then hung up. "Someone accessed the system overnight," she said. "The closing ceremony presentation, the one with all the translated speeches and cultural acknowledgments, has been corrupted. Half the slides are missing. The rest are filled with gibberish." "When?" "Sometime between midnight and 4 a.m. It is trying to restore from backup, but the backup was corrupted too." Marcus's mind raced. "The closing ceremony is in 8 hours." "I know. Do we have hard copies of the speeches?" "Some. Not all." "What about the original translation files? The ones I worked on?" Victoria paused. "Those should be on your tablet." Marcus pulled out his device and opened the folder. The files were there, intact, uncorrupted. "I have everything. Every speech, every acknowledgement, every cultural reference." Victoria exhaled. "Can you rebuild the presentation?" "It'll take hours." "We have 8. Marcus looked at the clock, looked at his tablet, looked at Victoria. "I'll need help." "You'll have it." She turned and began making calls. Within an hour, Marcus had assembled a team. Zoe from HR, 2 IT specialists, Fatima, the Arabic translator, who had worked with him on the original corrections. They commandeered a conference room and got to work. Marcus coordinated, assigned tasks, checked and double-checked every slide, every word, every cultural nuance. At 10 a.m., Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Progress. 60% complete. We're on track." "Good." She hesitated. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." He looked up. It traced the system breach. The access came from Hansen's credentials. Marcus froze. He's claiming his login was stolen. Says someone must have used his credentials without his knowledge. Do you believe him? Victoria's expression was unreadable. I believe that Derek Hansen is a man who would rather burn this hotel to the ground than admit he was wrong about anything. She turned to leave. Finish the presentation. I'll handle Hansen. At 11:30 a.m., the presentation was complete. Marcus reviewed every slide one final time. The speeches were perfect. The cultural acknowledgments were precise. The multilingual elements flowed seamlessly. He sent the file to the AV team and allowed himself exactly 30 seconds to breathe. Then his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won? This isn't over. Marcus stared at the message. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The closing ceremony began at 2 p.m. Marcus stood in the back of the main ballroom watching as Victoria took the stage. Distinguished guests, she said. Over the past 3 days, we have built something remarkable. Not just agreements or partnerships, but understanding, connection, trust. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. I want to acknowledge someone who made this possible. Someone who, until a week ago, most of us had never noticed. Someone who spent 7 years in this building invisible, overlooked, underestimated. Marcus's heart stopped. Mr. Marcus Webb, please come forward. Every eye in the room turned to him. For a moment he couldn't move. His feet felt rooted to the floor. Then he thought about Grace, about Lily, about all the times he had stood in the shadows waiting for permission to be seen. He walked forward. The applause began before he reached the stage. Victoria handed him the microphone. Say something, she whispered. Marcus looked out at the crowd. Ministers, CEOs, diplomats, journalists. He thought about everything he had wanted to say for 7 years. And then he spoke. 3 days ago, I cleaned the floors of this hotel. I pushed a mop and emptied trash cans and tried not to be noticed. I told myself that was enough. That staying invisible was the same as staying safe. He paused. I was wrong. The room was silent. There are people in every organization, maybe in this room right now, who have been told they don't belong. Who have applied for opportunities and been rejected for reasons that had nothing to do with their abilities. Who have watched less qualified people get promoted while they stayed stuck in the basement. His voice grew stronger. I'm not standing here because I'm special. I'm standing here because someone finally looked at me and saw what I could do instead of what I looked like. Someone took a chance on a janitor who spoke German in a hotel lobby. He looked at Victoria. That's not charity. That's recognition. And it shouldn't be rare. He turned back to the crowd. Every country represented here has people like me. People with talents that never get seen. Ideas that never get heard. Potential that never gets realized. The question isn't whether those people exist. The question is whether we're willing to look for them. He stepped back from the microphone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Director Park from Korea stood up and began to applaud. Minister Vanderberg followed. Then the Italian delegation, the French, the Chinese, the Saudis. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. Marcus stood on that stage, surrounded by applause, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Whole. After the ceremony, as delegates mingled and said their goodbyes, Victoria found Marcus standing alone by the window. That was unexpected, she said. Which part? All of it. She paused. You didn't have to say those things. Yes, I did. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Hansen resigned an hour ago, before I could fire him. He's claiming personal reasons, but we both know the truth. Marcus nodded slowly. What happens now? Now, the summit ends. The delegates go home. Deals get finalized. She turned to face him. And you and I have a conversation about your future. My future? I didn't promote you just for 3 days, Marcus. I promoted you because you deserved to be promoted 7 years ago. The question is, what comes next? Marcus looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. I don't know, he admitted. A week ago, I knew exactly what my life was. Mop floors, go home, survive. Now everything is different, and I don't know how to feel about that. Victoria stood beside him. When I was 23, she said, I was a secretary at a real estate firm. I had ideas, ambitions, plans. But no one listened. They saw a young woman making copies and answering phones, and that was all they could see. She paused. It took me 15 years to build what I have, 15 years of fighting for every inch. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to be invisible. I forgot to look for the people still stuck where I started. She turned to Marcus. You reminded me. And I'm grateful. Marcus didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that felt true. Thank you for seeing me. Victoria smiled a real smile, warm and unguarded. Thank you for being worth seeing. That night, Marcus went home to Lily. She was waiting at the door when he arrived, sketchbook in hand. She held up a drawing. It showed a man standing at a podium, lights shining down on him, a crowd of people applauding. Under the drawing she had written, I watched on the computer. Mrs. Patterson helped me find it. Marcus knelt down to her level. What did you think? Lily smiled. Then she spoke out loud, clear as a bell. I thought you were brave. Marcus pulled her into his arms and held her tight. I learned it from you, he whispered. They stayed like that for a long time. Father and daughter, two survivors who had finally found their way back to each other. Outside the city hummed with life. Inside, everything was quiet. And for the first time in 2 years, Marcus Webb felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 3 weeks after the summit ended, Marcus found himself standing in a room he never thought he would enter. Victoria's private office on the 43rd floor. Not the conference room where they had met before, her actual office. The space where she made decisions that affected thousands of lives. She sat behind her desk, a folder open in front of her. Close the door, she said. Marcus did. Sit. He sat. Victoria pushed the folder across the desk. This is a formal offer. Global Director of Cultural Strategy. You would report directly to me. Salary is $240,000 per year, plus benefits, plus performance bonuses. Marcus stared at the folder without opening it. I know what you're thinking, Victoria continued. It's too fast. Too much. You went from janitor to executive in less than a month, and part of you thinks it can't be real. She leaned forward. But here's what I need you to understand, Marcus. This isn't charity. This isn't guilt. This is recognition of what you're worth, what you've always been worth. The only thing that's changed is that now I'm paying attention. Marcus opened the folder slowly. The contract was 12 pages long. His eyes caught fragments: health insurance, retirement plan, relocation allowance, signing bonus. Numbers that would have seemed impossible a month ago. There's something else, Victoria said. I'm launching a new initiative. Internal talent discovery. We're going to audit every department, every position, every application that was rejected in the last 10 years. We're going to find the people we missed, the ones who got buried because someone decided they didn't fit. She paused. I want you to lead it. Marcus looked up. Me. Who better? You know what it feels like to be overlooked. You know what questions to ask, what patterns to look for, what excuses people use to keep talented people down. That's a massive undertaking. Yes, it is. Victoria held his gaze. That's why I need someone who actually cares about getting it right. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Can I think about it? Something flickered in Victoria's expression. Surprise, maybe. She wasn't used to people asking for time. Of course. Take a week. But Marcus... She stood and walked to the window. I've built this company over 20 years. I've made decisions that changed people's lives. Some of those decisions were right, some of them weren't. The summit showed me how much I've been missing. She turned back to face him. I don't want to miss anything else. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the contract spread out in front of him. Lily sat across from him, drawing in her sketchbook. She had been speaking more in the past few weeks, not constantly, not easily, but more. Small sentences, simple words. Each one felt like a miracle. What's that? She asked, pointing at the papers. A job offer. A good one. Marcus smiled. A very good one. Lily tilted her head. Then why do you look worried? He set down the page he had been reading. Because it's a big change, sweetheart. A really big change. New responsibilities, new expectations, new pressure. You handled the summit. That was 3 days. This would be forever. Lily considered this. Then she said, Is it scary because it's hard, or scary because you might actually be happy? Marcus blinked. For a 10-year-old who had barely spoken in 2 years, Lily had an uncanny ability to cut straight to the heart of things. I don't know, he admitted. Mom used to say that being scared of good things was the saddest kind of scared. Marcus felt his throat tighten. She said that. Lily nodded. When she was pregnant with me, she was really scared, but she said she didn't want to be the kind of person who ran away from good things just because they were scary. She looked at him with Grace's eyes. Are you gonna run away, Daddy? Marcus stared at his daughter. No, he said finally. I'm not. The next morning, Marcus went back to the hotel. Not to the executive floor, not to Victoria's office, to the basement. He walked through the maintenance corridors he had traveled for 7 years, past the supply closets, past the break room where he had eaten hundreds of silent lunches, past the lockers where he had kept his mop and bucket, an invisible existence. An older man was mopping the floor near the service elevator. Marcus recognized him, Raymond, one of the night shift guys. They had never spoken much, but they had nodded to each other in the hallways for years. Raymond looked up. His eyes widened. Webb, that you? Hey, Raymond. Man, I heard about what happened. Everybody's been talking about it. Raymond leaned on his mop. They say you gave some big speech, made the suits cry or something. Marcus smiled. I don't know about crying. They also say Hanson's gone. Finally. Yeah, he's gone. Raymond shook his head slowly. About damn time. That man made life hell for a lot of us. Always looking down, always finding reasons why we weren't good enough. Marcus nodded. I know. So what brings you back here? Come to say goodbye to the old life. Marcus looked around the corridor. The fluorescent lights, the concrete walls, the smell of cleaning solution and recycled air. Something like that. Raymond studied him for a moment. You know, when I first heard they promoted you, I thought it was a mistake. Not because you couldn't do it, but because they never promote people like us. That's just not how it works. Maybe it's time it started working differently. Raymond laughed, a short, skeptical sound. You really believe that? Marcus thought about Victoria's offer. About the Talent Discovery Initiative. About all the Raymonds in all the basements of all the hotels in the world. I'm starting to, he said. He spent the rest of the morning walking through the hotel, talking to people he had worked alongside for years. Maria, the housekeeper from El Salvador, whose daughter had a finance degree and no job prospects. She cried when Marcus told her about the new initiative, then immediately apologized for crying. Don't apologize, Marcus said. Your daughter deserves a chance. She's going to get one. Jamal, the line cook, who had been submitting improvement suggestions for 12 years and never received a single response. He pulled out a folder thick with ideas, everything from workflow efficiency to menu innovations. I kept them all, Jamal said. Figured someone would listen eventually. Someone's listening now, Marcus said. Thomas the bellhop from Haiti, who spoke 5 languages and had been passed over for the concierge position 6 times. He shook Marcus's hand so hard it hurt. "You really think things can change?" Thomas asked. "I think we can make them change." By noon, Marcus had collected 17 names, 17 people with skills, ideas, potential, 17 hidden voices waiting to be heard. He went back to Victoria's office. She looked up when he entered. "You're back early. I thought you wanted a week." Marcus set the contract on her desk, signed. "I don't need a week." Victoria picked up the contract, examined his signature, then looked at him. "What changed your mind?" "I went back to the basement this morning, talked to the people I used to work with, and I realized something. This job, it's not really about me. It's about them, the Mariahs and Jamals and Thomases who are still invisible. If I can do something about that, I don't have the right to say no." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly why I wanted you for this," she said finally. "I have a condition, though." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "A condition?" "I want Zoe, the HR analyst who helped me during the summit. She found the data on the rejected applications. She understands the systems better than anyone." "Done. And I want access to every personnel file for the last 10 years. No restrictions, no gatekeepers." "Also done. And I want an office in the basement." Victoria blinked. "The basement? If I'm going to find the people who've been overlooked, I need to be where they are, not on the 43rd floor, down in the places where the real work happens." Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You're going to be very good at this, aren't you?" "I'm going to try." 2 weeks later, Marcus held the first meeting of the Hidden Voices Initiative. The conference room was packed, not with executives, with housekeepers, cooks, maintenance workers, security guards, people who had never been invited to a meeting in their lives. Marcus stood at the front of the room. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this is unusual. Most of you have never been in this room before. Some of you have been told you don't belong in rooms like this." He paused. "I'm here to tell you that was a lie." The room was silent. "I spent 7 years pushing a mop in this hotel, 7 years being invisible, 7 years watching opportunities go to people who weren't more qualified, just more connected, more expected, more acceptable." He looked around at the faces watching him. "How many of you have applied for positions in this hotel and been rejected?" Slowly hands went up. 1, 5, 12, 20. Nearly everyone in the room. "How many of you were told you were overqualified?" More hands. "How many were told you weren't the right cultural fit?" Even more. Marcus nodded. "That ends now. This initiative exists to find people like us, people with skills and ideas that have been ignored. We're going to review every rejected application from the last decade. We're going to create pathways for advancement that don't depend on knowing the right people. We're going to build a system that actually sees talent instead of just credentials." A woman in the back raised her hand. Marcus recognized her, Elena, from the laundry department. "Mr. Webb, how do we know this is real? How do we know it won't just be another program that gets announced and then forgotten?" It was a fair question. Marcus had asked himself the same thing. "You don't," he said honestly. "You have no reason to trust me except that I was one of you 3 weeks ago. But here's what I can promise: I'm not going to forget where I came from. I'm not going to stop fighting for the people still stuck in the basement. And if this initiative fails, it won't be because I didn't try." Elena studied him for a long moment. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll give it a chance. That's all I'm asking." After the meeting, Zoe caught up with Marcus in the hallway. "That was impressive," she said. "You had them eating out of your hand." "I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was telling the truth." "Same thing sometimes." She handed him a tablet. "I finished the preliminary audit. You're not going to like what I found." Marcus looked at the screen. Charts. Graphs. Statistics. 147 qualified applicants rejected in the last 3 years, Zoe said. Of those, 93 had education levels higher than the people who got the jobs. 68 were rejected for reasons that weren't documented at all, just marked not selected. And here's the really ugly part. She pointed to a chart. Applicants with non-Western names were rejected at 3 times the rate of applicants with Western names, even when their qualifications were identical. Marcus stared at the data. Can we prove that was intentional? Not directly, but we can prove it was systemic. The patterns are too consistent to be coincidence. Marcus thought about Hansen, about 12 years of gatekeeping, about all the talented people who had been turned away because they didn't look right, sound right, come from the right background. This goes to Victoria, he said, today. Victoria's reaction was exactly what Marcus expected. She read the report in silence. Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around the edges of the tablet. This happened under my watch, she said finally. 12 years of this, and I didn't see it. You weren't looking for it. That's not an excuse. No, but it's the truth. Victoria set down the tablet. What do you recommend? First, we identify every person who was wrongly rejected. We reach out to them. We offer them a chance to reapply with a fair review process. That's going to be expensive, time-consuming. It's also the right thing to do. Victoria nodded slowly. What else? We change the hiring process. Blind reviews for initial applications, no names, no photos, no information that could trigger bias. We require documented reasons for every rejection. We audit outcomes quarterly to catch patterns before they become systemic. The department heads won't like that. Then they can find jobs somewhere else. Victoria looked at him sharply. I mean it, Marcus said. If people can't handle fair competition, they don't deserve positions of power. The whole point of this initiative is to change the culture, not just patch over the symptoms. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. You've changed, she said. Have I? 3 weeks ago you would have apologized for being so direct. You would have softened it, hedged, made it easier to swallow. Marcus considered this. 3 weeks ago, I was still afraid of taking up space. I'm not anymore. Victoria smiled a real smile, rare and unguarded. Good. Fear makes people small. You were never meant to be small. That weekend, Marcus took Lily to the hotel for the first time. He had told her about the job, about the initiative, about all the changes that were happening, but he wanted her to see it for herself. They walked through the lobby together, hand in hand. This is where you work now? Lily asked. This is where I work now. It's big. It is. Do you like it? Marcus thought about the question. I like what we're building, he said. I like that we're trying to make things better. I like that people are starting to believe things can change. Lily squeezed his hand. They took the elevator to the basement level, Marcus's new office carved out of a storage room that had been collecting dust for years. It wasn't fancy. A desk, some chairs, a whiteboard covered with names and notes. But on the wall, Marcus had hung something special. His diploma from Yale, his certificates from the linguistics conferences, and a new frame containing Lily's drawing, the one she had made during the summit, showing a man at a podium with flags behind him. Lily stared at the drawing. You kept it? Of course I kept it. Why? Marcus knelt down to her level. Because this is where it started. You made this drawing, and I looked at it, and I remembered that I used to be someone, that I still could be someone. Lily's eyes were bright. You were always someone, Daddy. You just forgot. Marcus pulled her into a hug. I know, he whispered. But thank you for reminding me. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Lily pulled back and said, Can I see the rest of the hotel? Marcus smiled. Absolutely. They spent the afternoon exploring. Marcus introduced Lily to the people he had been working with, Maria, Jamal, Thomas, Elena. Each of them greeted her warmly, and Marcus watched as his daughter slowly opened up, asking questions, listening to stories, even laughing at Jamal's terrible jokes. By the time they reached the rooftop garden, the sun was setting. Marcus and Lily sat on a bench watching the sky turn orange and pink. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart. I think Mom would like this place." Marcus felt his heart squeeze. "Why do you say that?" "Because it's where you help people talk to each other." "That's what she did, right? Help people understand each other." Marcus blinked back tears. "Yeah, that's exactly what she did." Lily leaned against his shoulder. "I think she would be proud of you." Marcus put his arm around her. "I think she would be proud of both of us." They sat in silence, watching the sun disappear behind the buildings. And for the first time in a very long time, Marcus felt like Grace was with them. Not as a memory, not as a loss, but as a presence, warm and gentle and proud. He had spent 2 years running from grief. Now finally, he was learning to carry it with him. Not as a weight, as a gift. Monday morning brought new challenges. A senior director named Patricia Coleman requested a meeting with Marcus. She had been with the company for 15 years and had never once acknowledged his existence during his janitorial days. Now she wanted to talk. "Mr. Webb," she said, sitting across from him in his basement office. "I want to be honest with you. I have concerns about this initiative." "What kind of concerns?" "The audit you're conducting, it's going to expose things that some people would rather keep buried. Decisions were made, patterns developed. Not everyone who participated in those patterns did so maliciously." "I understand that." "Do you?" Patricia leaned forward. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you're building a case against half the management team. That's not going to make you popular." "I'm not trying to be popular." "You should be. Popularity is power. Without it, initiatives like yours die quiet deaths." Marcus studied her. "What are you really saying, Ms. Coleman?" Patricia was silent for a moment. "I'm saying that I've seen reform efforts before. They start with passion and end with politics. The people who lead them either burn out or get pushed out. I don't want to see that happen to you." "Because you care about me." "Because I care about the initiative." She paused. "Believe it or not, I agree with what you're trying to do. I've watched good people get passed over for years. I've seen the system protect mediocrity while burying excellence. But I've also seen what happens when reformers move too fast, make too many enemies, forget that change requires allies as well as conviction." Marcus leaned back. "What do you suggest?" "Build coalitions. Find the people in management who want things to change and bring them inside the tent. Don't make this you versus everyone else. Make it us versus the old way." Marcus considered her words. "And what about the people who don't want things to change?" Patricia smiled grimly. "Them you isolate. You document their resistance. You let their own actions condemn them. But you don't make them martyrs by attacking them directly." "That sounds like politics." "It is politics. Everything is politics. The question is whether you're going to play the game skillfully or get played by it." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for the advice," he said finally. "You're welcome." Patricia stood. "For what it's worth, I think you have a real chance to change things here. Don't waste it." She left. Marcus sat alone in his office thinking about coalitions and enemies and the long game. He had spent 7 years avoiding politics. Now politics was unavoidable. But Patricia was right about one thing: he couldn't do this alone. He picked up his phone and started making calls. By the end of the week, Marcus had assembled a team. Zoe, of course. She had become invaluable. Her understanding of data and systems complemented his understanding of people and culture. Thomas, the multilingual bellhop, who had accepted a position as outreach coordinator. He spent his days talking to employees in their native languages, building trust, gathering stories. Maria's daughter Carmen, who had finally been given a chance to prove herself and had exceeded every expectation. She was now handling financial analysis for the initiative, tracking costs and projecting returns. And Patricia Coleman, who had quietly become one of Marcus's most important allies. She navigated the politics he couldn't stomach and protected him from attacks he never saw coming. Together, they were changing things. Not overnight, not without resistance, but steadily, persistently, one decision at a time. 3 months after the summit, Marcus stood in front of the board of directors. Victoria had arranged the presentation. She sat at the head of the table watching. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "the Hidden Voices Initiative has been operational for 12 weeks. In that time, we have reviewed 437 previously rejected applications. We have identified 119 candidates who were wrongly passed over for positions they were qualified for." He clicked to the next slide. Of those 119, have been offered new interviews. 41 have been hired into positions matching their qualifications. 14 have been promoted from their current roles. A board member raised his hand. "What about the cost?" The total investment has been approximately $270,000. However, early projections suggest that improved retention and productivity among newly promoted employees will generate returns of roughly $600,000 in the first year alone. Another board member spoke. "And what about morale? I've heard concerns that this initiative is creating resentment among existing staff who feel their positions are being threatened." Marcus nodded. "There has been some resistance. Change is uncomfortable. But employee satisfaction surveys show a 17% increase in positive sentiment since the initiative launched, and turnover among frontline staff has decreased by 23%. He clicked to the final slide. "But numbers don't tell the whole story. Let me share just one example." He paused. Maria Gonzalez worked as a housekeeper in this hotel for 14 years. Her daughter Carmen graduated top of her class with a degree in finance. Carmen applied for entry-level positions here 3 times and was rejected each time, once for being overqualified, once for insufficient experience, and once with no reason given at all. He let that sink in. 3 weeks ago, Carmen completed a comprehensive financial analysis that identified cost-saving opportunities worth over $400,000 annually. She's now on track to become one of our youngest financial analysts. He looked around the table. That's what this initiative is about. Not charity, not diversity for diversity's sake, but recognizing that talent exists everywhere, and that when we ignore it, we hurt ourselves as much as we hurt the people we overlook. Silence. Then slowly, the board members began to nod. One of them spoke. "Mr. Webb. I'll admit I was skeptical of this initiative. It seemed like another feel-good program that would generate headlines and nothing else. I was wrong." Another added, "The data is compelling. But more than that, the philosophy is sound. We've been leaving money on the table by ignoring people who could have been contributing all along." Victoria spoke for the first time. "I think we can all agree that Mr. Webb has exceeded expectations. The question now is how we scale this, not just at the grand view across all Monroe properties." The board voted unanimously to expand the initiative. Marcus walked out of that meeting feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from doing hard work and having it recognized. Victoria caught up with him in the hallway. "Well done," she said. "Thank you for giving me the chance." "You earned it." She paused. "There's something else I want to talk to you about, but not here. Come to the rooftop garden tonight, 8 o'clock. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The rooftop? Humor me." That night, Marcus took the elevator to the roof. Victoria was already there, standing by the railing, looking out at the city lights. She turned when she heard him approach. "Thank you for coming. You made it sound important." "It is." She handed him a glass of wine. "I wanted to do this somewhere that meant something. This is where you first brought Lily, isn't it?" Marcus nodded. How did you know? I pay attention. She smiled. More than I used to anyway. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city breathe. Marcus, I've been thinking about the future, not just the initiative everything. This company, my legacy, what happens when I'm gone? You're not going anywhere. Not tomorrow, but eventually. She turned to face him. I built this empire alone. For 20 years I told myself that was strength, independence, power. But watching you these past few months, watching how you build coalitions, how you bring people together, how you lead by listening instead of commanding, I've realized something. She paused. I've been doing it wrong. Marcus didn't know what to say. I want you to consider something, Victoria continued. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. I want you to consider taking over this company. Marcus nearly dropped his wine glass. What? Not as CEO, not yet, but as my partner, my heir apparent, the person who carries this forward when I can't. Victoria, I've been in this role for 3 months. I was a janitor 4 months ago. And 4 months ago, I didn't know what real leadership looked like. Now I do. She set down her glass. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. Take as long as you need. But I wanted you to know where I see this going, where I want it to go. Marcus stared at her. Why me? Victoria smiled. Because you're the only person I've ever met who cares more about being right than being powerful. And that's exactly what this company needs. She walked to the door. Good night, Marcus. We'll talk more when you're ready. She left. Marcus stood alone on the rooftop, wine glass in hand, trying to comprehend what had just happened. 4 months ago, he had been invisible. Now, he was being offered an empire. He looked up at the stars. The same stars Grace had loved, the same stars he had shown Lily on countless nights. What do I do? He whispered. The stars didn't answer. But somewhere inside him, a voice that sounded very much like Grace said, You already know. He finished his wine and went home to his daughter. 6 months after Victoria's offer on the rooftop, Marcus still hadn't given her an answer. Not because he was uncertain, but because he wanted to earn it first. The Hidden Voices initiative had expanded to 12 Monroe properties across the country. 237 employees had been promoted or hired through the program. Retention rates were up across the board. The business press had started calling it the Monroe Model, a case study in how corporations could unlock hidden talent. But Marcus knew the numbers were only part of the story. The real story was in the faces. Maria, who had been promoted to housekeeping supervisor and was now training the next generation of staff. She still cried sometimes when she talked about Carmen's success, but now they were tears of joy. Jamal, whose ideas had revolutionized the kitchen workflow and earned him a position as culinary operations manager. He had submitted 47 improvement proposals in his first month alone, 12 years of pent-up creativity finally unleashed. Thomas, who had been named head concierge and now greeted guests in 9 languages. He had a framed photo on his desk of his mother in Haiti, and he told everyone who would listen that she was the reason he never gave up. And Elena, the woman from the laundry department, who had asked Marcus how she could trust that things would really change. She was now running the employee development program at the Chicago property, teaching others to find their voice the way she had found hers. These were the stories that mattered. These were the reasons Marcus got up every morning. But today was different. Today Marcus was going home. Not to his apartment on the south side, though that would always be home in one sense. Today he was going back to Yale. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago. The university's linguistics department wanted to honor him with their Distinguished Alumni Award. They had read about his work. They had seen the articles, the interviews, the impact he was making. They wanted him to give a speech. Marcus had almost said no. He wasn't comfortable with praise, wasn't sure he deserved it. But Lily had insisted. You have to go, Daddy. She had said, her voice clear and strong, so different from the silent girl she had been a year ago. You have to show them who you are. So here he was on a train headed to New Haven, Connecticut, watching the countryside blur past the window. Lily sat beside him reading a book about flags of the world. She had become obsessed with languages and cultures over the past year, absorbing everything Marcus taught her like a sponge. Daddy. Yeah, sweetheart. Are you nervous? Marcus considered the question. A little. Why, you've given lots of speeches. This one's different. These are people who knew me before. Before everything fell apart. Before I became invisible. Lily put down her book. But you're not invisible anymore. No. But part of me remembers what it felt like. Part of me still expects them to look right through me. Lily reached over and took his hand. Then I'll stand really close to you, she said. So they have to see both of us. Marcus smiled. Deal. The ceremony was held in the same auditorium where Marcus had defended his thesis 15 years ago. He stood backstage, heart pounding, listening to the department chair introduce him. Marcus Webb's story is not just about academic achievement, it's about resilience. It's about the courage to rebuild a life from the ground up. It's about the recognition that true intelligence isn't measured in degrees or publications, it's measured in how we lift others up. The chair paused. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our distinguished Alumni Award recipient, Marcus Webb. Applause filled the auditorium. Marcus walked to the podium. The lights were bright. The faces in the audience were a blur. But in the front row, he could see Lily sitting between Victoria and Zoe, who had both insisted on coming. He took a breath. Thank you. It's strange to be back here. The last time I stood in this auditorium, I was 26 years old and convinced I was going to change the world through academic research. I had plans, theories, ambitions. He paused. None of them worked out the way I expected. A murmur rippled through the audience. 15 years ago, I graduated from this program with honors. I published papers. I gave lectures. I thought I understood what it meant to communicate across cultures, to build bridges between people who spoke different languages. He shook his head. I didn't understand anything. The room was silent. 7 years ago, my wife was killed by a drunk driver. My daughter was in the car. She survived, but she stopped speaking. For 2 years, not a single word. He felt his voice catch. I fell apart. I couldn't function. I took a job as a janitor at a hotel in Chicago because it was the only thing I could manage. I pushed a mop for 7 years. I applied for better positions 12 times and was rejected every single time. He looked out at the audience. I became invisible, and I told myself that was okay. That staying small was the same as staying safe. That if I didn't hope for anything, I couldn't be disappointed. He paused. I was wrong. He straightened. 6 months ago, I answered a phone call in German in the middle of a hotel lobby. A billionaire CEO overheard me. She asked questions. She looked at my record, and she gave me a chance not because I asked for it, but because she was paying attention. He smiled. That's all it took. Someone paying attention. Someone choosing to see what had been there all along. He looked at Lily. My daughter taught me that. She spent 2 years in silence. But she never stopped communicating. She drew pictures. She wrote notes. She found ways to express what words couldn't contain. And when she finally spoke again, the first thing she said was, Willkommen. Welcome. Tears glistened in Lily's eyes. She reminded me that language isn't just about words, it's about connection. It's about the courage to reach across the space between us and say, I see you. I hear you. You matter. Marcus gripped the podium. That's what I've tried to do with my work. Not just translate languages, but translate people. Help them understand each other. Help them see the humanity in someone who looks different, sounds different, comes from a different world. He looked around the auditorium. There are people in this room who will go on to brilliant careers. You'll publish papers, give lectures, win awards. But let me tell you something I wish someone had told me 15 years ago. He leaned forward. The most important work you'll ever do won't happen in journals or conference rooms. It will happen in the moments when you choose to see someone who's been overlooked. When you take a chance on someone who's been told they don't belong. When you use your voice to amplify voices that have been silenced. He stepped back from the podium. I spent 7 years invisible. Now I spend every day trying to make sure no one else has to feel that way. Not because I'm special. Not because I'm heroic. But because I know what it costs to be unseen. And I refuse to let that be anyone else's story. He paused. Thank you for this honor, but if you really want to honor me, don't just applaud. Go find someone who's been overlooked. Look them in the eye. Tell them they matter. That's the only award that means anything. He stepped away from the microphone. For a moment, silence. Then Lily stood up. She started clapping. Victoria stood next to her. Then Zoe. Then the department chair. Then the entire auditorium. The applause washed over Marcus like a wave not of praise, but of recognition, of understanding, of shared humanity. He looked at his daughter standing in the front row, tears streaming down her face but smiling so bright it hurt to look at. She mouthed 2 words. I'm proud. Marcus mouthed back, me too. After the ceremony, Victoria found him in the reception hall. That was quite a speech, she said. I meant every word. I know you did. That's why it worked. She handed him a glass of champagne. I have news. Good news or bad news? Depends on how you look at it. The board met this morning. They've approved the expansion of Hidden Voices to all Monroe properties worldwide. 47 locations, 16 countries. Marcus stared at her. Worldwide. They want you to oversee it. Global Director of Talent Development. You'd be building the program from the ground up in every region. Marcus set down his champagne. Victoria, that's I don't even know what to say. Say yes. It's not that simple. Lily's in school. She's finally stable. I can't just uproot her life. You won't have to. The position is based in Chicago. You'll travel, yes, but you'll always come home. Victoria paused. I made sure of that. Marcus looked at her. Why? Because I know what it's like to sacrifice everything for a career. I don't want that for you. You're not just an employee, Marcus. You're... She hesitated. You're the closest thing I have to family. The words hung in the air. Marcus didn't know what to say. Victoria Sterling, the woman who had built an empire through sheer force of will, who never showed vulnerability, who had spent 20 years keeping everyone at arm's length, had just admitted something she had probably never said aloud. Victoria? Don't make it weird. She smiled. Just say you'll take the job. Marcus laughed. Okay, I'll take the job. Good. She raised her glass. To new beginnings. He clinked his glass against hers. To new beginnings. That night, Marcus and Lily walked through the Yale campus together. The autumn leaves had turned golden and red, carpeting the pathways in color. Students hurried past, bundled against the November chill, lost in their own worlds. Lily held Marcus's hand as they walked. Daddy. Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think Mom can see us? Marcus felt his heart squeeze. I don't know for sure, but I like to think she can. What do you think she would say about everything that's happened? Marcus stopped walking. He knelt down to Lily's level. I think she would say that she's proud of us, that we survived something terrible and came out the other side, that we found our way back to each other. Lily nodded slowly. I talk to her sometimes, she said quietly. At night before I go to sleep. I tell her about my day, about school, about you. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. What do you tell her about me? Lily smiled. I tell her you're not sad anymore, that you laugh now, that you help people. She paused. I tell her you're the dad she always knew you could be. Marcus pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me. I never did, Lily whispered. Not even when you gave up on yourself. They stood there for a long moment, father and daughter, two survivors, who had found their way through the darkness. Then Lily pulled back and said, "Can we get ice cream?" Marcus laughed through his tears. "It's 40 degrees outside. So, yeah, let's get ice cream." They walked hand in hand toward the town center, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. And Marcus realized something. This was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of pain, not the forgetting of grief, but the presence of love strong enough to carry both. 1 year later, Marcus stood in a different auditorium. This one was in the Grandview Regency Hotel, transformed for the first annual Hidden Voices Summit. Representatives from all 47 Monroe properties had gathered. Over 300 employees who had been promoted through the program sat in the audience. Marcus looked out at the faces. Maria was there in the third row, wiping tears from her eyes. Carmen sat beside her now, a senior financial analyst. Jamal was there wearing the chef's jacket he had never thought he'd earn. Thomas was there translating the speech in real time for delegates who had flown in from overseas. Elena was there leading the welcome committee, her transformation from skeptic to believer complete. And in the front row, as always, sat Lily. She was 11 now, still quiet by nature, but no longer silent. She had started writing poetry poems about flags and languages and the spaces between words. Her teacher said she had a gift. Beside Lily sat Victoria, who had become something like a grandmother figure over the past year. They had dinner together every Sunday. Victoria was teaching Lily about business. Lily was teaching Victoria about imagination. It was an unlikely family, but it was theirs. Marcus cleared his throat. Welcome to the first Hidden Voices Summit. If you're in this room, it's because someone saw you, someone believed in you, someone refused to let you stay invisible. He paused. I know what that feels like. 2 years ago, I was pushing a mop in the basement of this hotel. I had given up on myself. I had accepted that I would never be more than what others decided I was. He shook his head. I was wrong. And so is anyone who has ever told you that you don't belong, that you're not qualified, that you should know your place. His voice grew stronger. Your place is wherever your talents take you. Your place is at the table in the room at the center of the conversation. Your place is not determined by where you started, it's determined by where you're willing to go. He looked at the audience. The people in this room are proof that potential has no address. It doesn't live in fancy schools or well-connected families. It lives in housekeepers who dream of management, in cooks who imagine new flavors, in bellhops who speak 5 languages, and concierges who see possibilities where others see problems. He smiled. We are the hidden voices, and we're not hiding anymore. The applause started somewhere in the middle of the room and spread like wildfire. People stood, people cheered, people hugged each other and cried. Marcus watched it all, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Fulfillment, maybe. Purpose. Belonging. Or maybe just the simple, profound joy of being seen. After the summit, Marcus found himself alone in his basement office. The space had changed over the past year. The walls were now covered with photos of employees who had been promoted, teams celebrating milestones, faces that had been invisible once but weren't anymore. There was a knock at the door. Come in. Lily entered, holding something behind her back. Everyone's looking for you, she said. There's a party upstairs. I know, I just needed a minute. Lily walked over and sat on the edge of his desk. What are you thinking about? Marcus looked around the office. I'm thinking about how different everything is. A year ago, this was a storage room. I was a janitor. You weren't speaking. We were barely surviving. And now. He shook his head. I don't know how to describe it. It's like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having. Lily nodded. I have something for you, she said. I made it myself. She pulled a small frame from behind her back and handed it to him. Marcus looked at it. Inside the frame was a drawing, not a child's drawing anymore, but something more sophisticated. It showed a man standing at a podium, light shining down on him. Around him, a crowd of people, all different colors and sizes, all reaching toward him. And in the corner, a small girl holding a sign. The sign said, "My dad changed the world." Marcus felt his throat close. "Lily." "It's not perfect," she said quickly. "I'm still learning, but I wanted you to have something to remember today." Marcus set the frame down carefully. "Come here." Lily walked into his arms. They held each other for a long moment, father and daughter survivors' family. "You know what?" Marcus said finally. "What? You changed the world too. Every word you spoke after 2 years of silence. Every drawing you made. Every time you reminded me that there was something worth fighting for." He pulled back and looked at her. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Lily smiled. "I know. That's why I made the sign." Marcus laughed. "You're impossible. I learned from the best." They walked upstairs together hand in hand to join the celebration. The party was in full swing. Music played, people danced, champagne flowed. Victoria found Marcus near the bar. "Hiding from your own party." "Just taking it all in." She stood beside him watching the crowd. "You know, when I first saw you in that lobby speaking German to your phone, I didn't know what to make of you. You were so clearly out of place, but not in the way I expected." "What do you mean?" "I mean you were too good for where you were. It was obvious, and I couldn't understand why no one else had noticed." She turned to face him. "It took me 57 years to learn something you already knew. That talent isn't rare recognition is. That the problem isn't finding good people, it's seeing them." She raised her glass. "You taught me that, Marcus. You taught everyone in this room. And for that I'll always be grateful." Marcus clinked his glass against hers. "Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for being worth the chance." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the celebration. Then Victoria said, "There's one more thing." "What?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out an envelope. "Open it." Marcus did. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A legal document. He read it twice before he understood. "Victoria, this is partnership papers. 50-50 ownership of the Hidden Voices Initiative. It's yours now as much as it's mine." Marcus stared at her. "I can't accept this." "You already have. I had the lawyers draw it up last month." She smiled. "Consider it a thank you for reminding me why I started this company in the first place." Marcus didn't know what to say, so he did something he had never done before. He hugged Victoria Sterling. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, hugging him back. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you," she replied. They pulled apart, both of them, blinking back tears. "Now," Victoria said briskly, "go enjoy your party. You've earned it." She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus stood alone, partnership papers in hand, watching the people he had helped transform. Maria dancing with Carmen. Jamal telling jokes to a crowd of admirers. Thomas translating toasts in 4 different languages. Elena leading a conga line through the middle of the ballroom. And Lily, in the center of it all, laughing and spinning and alive. Marcus folded the papers and put them in his pocket. Then he walked into the crowd to join his daughter. The music swelled, the lights sparkled, the room pulsed with joy and hope and possibility. And Marcus Webb, once invisible, once forgotten, once convinced that he would never matter again, danced with his daughter in a room full of people who had found their voices because he had found his. Later that night, after the party ended and the guests went home, Marcus and Lily stood on the rooftop garden. The city stretched out beneath them, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. "Daddy." "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you remember what Mom used to say about how some people are like stars?" Marcus nodded. "She said some people shine so bright you can see them from anywhere, and some people are quieter, but they're just as beautiful if you know how to look. Lily pointed at the sky. I think you're both kinds now. Marcus looked up at the stars. Grace was out there somewhere. He was sure of it. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as a presence woven into the fabric of everything he had become. She had taught him to listen. She had taught him to love. She had given him Lily. And through all the darkness and silence and invisibility, that love had survived. You know what I think, Marcus said. What? I think your mother would be proud of both of us. I think she would look at what we've built together and she would smile. Lily leaned against him. I think so too. They stood in silence, father and daughter, looking up at the infinite stars. And Marcus understood finally what Grace had been trying to teach him all along. That the most powerful language isn't the one we speak, it's the one we become. He had spent his life studying words, but the only word that ever really mattered was the one he saw in his daughter's eyes every single day. Love. The invisible made visible. The silent made heard. The lost made found. Marcus Webb had been a janitor, a professor, a father, a failure. Now he was something more. He was proof that no one is ever truly invisible, not if someone is willing to look. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure others knew that too. The stars burned above them. The city hummed below. And somewhere in the space between a man who had once been invisible finally understood what it meant to be seen. Not for what he had accomplished, not for what he had overcome, but for who he had always been, a father, a teacher, a voice for the voiceless, a man who refused to let anyone else feel invisible. That was his legacy. That was his gift. That was enough.